Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Today is an interview style episode, and I'll get more into introducing our guest in a minute. Before, I thought I'd tell you a little funny story. I don't know if it's that funny quite yet. So this past weekend, I went to a family wedding in Seattle, and it was so much fun. I brought one of my children. I brought my 10-year-old son because husband and I decided that between the financial impact and the impact of school and traveling with Levi's needs, it was too much to do a quick trip. And so we took one child representative and myself to this wedding, and we had a blast. And my cousins from this side of the family were all together, and we were joking about how we must have the special gene because none of us had had COVID yet. And I'm not sure if you can hear it in my voice, but it turns out I don't have the gene. I'm so sad. Yeah, this week I have been meaning to record this introduction Monday, and I was like, I really don't feel well. I hope tomorrow I'll feel better, I'm sure. Yesterday, a little bit better, but the recording just didn't get done. And today, Wednesday, I'm doing it because you know what? You're going to be listening to this tomorrow, and I wanted to do this episode justice with a recording. So I'm going to do my very best with my COVID brain, and you can send me all the love and prayers as you listen to this, knowing that I am on my day 4 of COVID, assuming you're listening tomorrow. And if it's much beyond that, let's just hope I'm still not having COVID. Okay. So our guest today is Kelly Speck. And I actually just re-listened to the episode because I recorded it quite a while ago. And I wanted to make sure I was refreshed on what we talked about so I could properly, again, introduce it. And what I want to share about Kelly is, man, I love her energy, her spunk. I think I mentioned it in the episode. She's got a beautiful balance of depth, but also with a lot of funny and just a lot of energy. So let me tell you a little bit more about Kelly. Kelly is like one of us that had dreamed of a much different life. She once thought that she would spend her life as a working mom, hustling corporate, volunteering for the PTA. And I'm sure you can guess that because of her child's disabilities, life threw her a number of curveballs. So she goes into her story in more depth in the episode. And she's the mother of a 14-year-old son with quadriplegic cerebral palsy. Also a mother of a child with no disabilities and a child who was born with a cleft lip. So, as you can imagine, she's had her fair share of conversations with God about what's happening. And in this episode, she shares her NICU journey. And I wanted to mention, I think I love the way that she shares because she shares a picture of what her experience was. I did wonder, for some of you that have had the NICU experience quite fresh, you may consider that skipping about to minute 15 would serve you in the sense of like, if you're not ready to kind of go back to those moments in terms of stirring up the trauma, go ahead and skip to minute 15 and you won't have missed essential parts of the story to be able to still get all the value from the episode. However, I think for many of us, hearing the becoming of different special needs mom's story and kind of what was happening in the early days is always really valuable, even if it's very different from our own. So Kelly does a wonderful job of kind of just sharing her becoming story. And then we move on to talking about her journey to acceptance and what acceptance gave her access to. Thankfully, she shares with us a little bit about her book towards the end. And I think one of the biggest gifts anybody can have is hope. So she talks about the hope of her book being something to give other people hope, whether they are parents of children with disabilities or not. And so I do encourage you to go at the end of this episode, go click on the links and go grab a copy of her book, because you'll see from her energy in the episode that it's going to be a great way to connect with somebody in a way that has both the highs and both the lows. And I think that's so valuable. Let's get right into the episode. Welcome, Kelly Speck. Welcome, Kelly Speck, to the Special Needs Mom podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kira. I'm really, really honored to be here. Your podcast is one that is really near and dear to my heart. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, I'm really excited to dig into your story. So let's go right in. I would love to hear a little bit about the becoming a mom. And it sounds like for you was synonymous with you becoming a special needs mom. So why don't you bring us all the way back and give us a little picture of then? And then also feel free to trickle in the now. Like, what's a day in the life of Kelly look like now?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I would just say I grew up in Northern Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. I met a boy from Tennessee in the middle of West Texas in college, and we got married young, like 22 years old, young.
I was 23, so I have to laugh because I look back and I'm like, how did my parents allow me to do that?
How was this legal? I mean, we thought we were so mature.
I know. That's the best part. I'm like, oh my God.
Greener than the grass is all we can say. But, we knew we wanted to be together, and we just said, let's grow up together, because it's basically what we've done. So we got married. We both started our careers we lived in Raleigh, North Carolina for a while. And then my husband was like, I want to do grad school in DC. And I'm like, oh my gosh, don't take me back to that crazy place. So, but we ended up back in DC. He did graduate school and a fellowship, and I was in the public accounting world. So just both working tons of hours. We were just type A planners. We really just were saving for that first house, active in our church, friends, family. I mean, just boring, ordinary people, to be honest. We did not have much of an exciting nightlife at all. But, we both families were important to us. Or starting our family, eventually we knew faith was an important part of our life. And so we were in small groups and doing community service. And anyway, just living a Dink's life, double income, no kids. But we were control freaks for sure. We had an Excel spreadsheet where we, had all our saving goals on there. And we worked for about 7 years. We call it the 7 years of plenty before the 7 years of
years of plenty. So good.
But we got pregnant in 2006, and we were so excited, and we found out it was a little boy, and we were elated. I have 2 younger brothers. I love all things boy and sports, and my husband is 6'5", athlete, was ready to coach Little League and play basketball with his son. And we named him Bennett Mitchell Speck. We knew his name, had all the baby showers, all the laundry was folded and ready to have him. And he was full term. He was like 38 weeks and 4 days when my water broke. And I just had a doctor's appointment that week. Everything was looking good. So I woke my husband up, and I was like, my water just broke. And so the contractions started, and everything really went as quote unquote, all the books and classes, we had prepped ourselves with, was going textbook until we got to the hospital. And after a couple hours of laboring, the OB said, every time you have a contraction, his heart rate's going up a little bit. So we think we want to go ahead and do a C-section. And I said, absolutely. My mom had 3 C-sections. Even though I had a quote unquote birth plan, I was totally fine with that. And so off we went to the operating room. And I just remember being like, oh man, I forgot to bring my playlist of the music I wanted to play when he's pulled in my body. Because, at that point, blogs were a big deal. And so I had all these great ideas from all these blogging mommies. And I'm like, oh, darn, where's my playlist? And they opened me up and took Bennett out, and it was quiet as could be in that room. And there was not a cry to be heard. And just the tension filled the room. You could just feel the tension, cut it with a knife almost. And I just am laying there, and Travis is kind of trying to get a read for what's going on. And a nurse just said, here's your baby, and ran out the door with him. I remember thinking, I thought I was supposed to lay him on my chest and have skin to skin and try nursing. This doesn't feel like a textbook. But quickly we realized, as I went on to recovery, my husband was taken to the NICU, and the doctor said, he was born with very low APGAR scores, which if anyone knows what those are kind of the initial numbers that a doctor gives to a newborn baby, like 1 and 2 were his numbers. So he was born very, very, very sick, close to really death, pneumonia, had his lungs jam-packed. And so immediately he was transported. At that point, we were at the quote unquote best hospital to have a baby in DC. And because, I was waiting my massage in the recovery room, and they just said, we need to get him to a level 5 NICU right away. So he was taken a couple miles down the street to the Georgetown University NICU. And Travis had the decision. Travis is my husband. Do I stay with my wife or do I go with my baby? And obviously we were like, go follow the ambulance. And so, that just began baptism into parenthood. And it was a really, really traumatic, awful 70 days that then followed. And so he was immediately put on a cooling blanket, because they were afraid that he had some sort of trauma to the brain just because he was born, needing so much oxygen. He was put on ECMO, which a lot of people are now familiar with because of COVID, unfortunately. But basically, it's a life-saving machine that takes blood out, oxygenates it, and puts it back in your body. And so that is a kind of gruesome, you only do that if you have to. And we got to Georgetown, and within the first night, they said, the ventilator is not doing enough. He needs ECMO, sign this paper, and there's an 80% chance of him living. And I just remember thinking, okay, by that point I had been transported, and I kind of can go into more detail about that. But it was just, I was on so many pain meds. I barely even remember any of it because I was just kind of flying in the sky in terms of emotions and mentally. And my poor husband was just the only level-headed, right-minded person really kind of surveying the circumstances. And so ECMO was a really wild ride because Bennett just wasn't getting better. And his lungs just, they were just jam-packed every day. And so finally they did chest tubes. They were just trying to do whatever they could to get this pneumonia out of his lungs. And he was having hypertension and kidney issues and retaining too much water. I mean, you name it. About day 16 of ECMO, a bunch of doctors and fellows got us together in a room and they said, we do not think your baby can survive any longer. We have to take him off ECMO, but he's not ready. But we don't have any choice. Because at that point, when you're on ECMO, you're on blood thinners, which obviously so many people are on blood thinners for so many reasons. And it was good because it was keeping clots from hopefully forming in his body. But the unfortunate thing was every open line going into his body, including the chest tubes, blood was just gushing out of. And so it was just a crime scene. We were basically almost watching our baby bleed to death right in front of us. And obviously the nurses and doctors were doing everything they could. He was getting blood transfusion after blood transfusion. But at the end of ECMO, it was just, it was looking very, very grim. And so my husband and I, were broken beyond words, but we were also in complete survival mode where we couldn't even spend the night at the NICU because it's such an old NICU there at Georgetown. It's never been renovated. And so we would go home, sleep a couple hours, come back in the morning, just hoping he was still alive, keeping the phone by our heads that we weren't going to get a call to come say goodbye. And so he came off ECMO and we had people around the world praying, just help this baby to come off the machine and be able to sustain life. And he did. And we were beyond thrilled. The first 24 hours passed and then 48 hours. And right around 48 hours post ECMO, his lungs just opened up. And that was what we consider a miracle. I mean, the doctors and nurses were like, we've never seen anything like this. Like, we're taking him off the ventilator. I mean, like within days, he went from ECMO to off the ventilator, which was amazing. We were like, so beyond jubilation, our baby's alive. He's, coming off the ventilator. Like we may actually be able to bring him home. As first-time parents, we just, I mean, the thought of losing him at that point was I just remember thinking, how do I plan a funeral for my baby, my newborn baby, of whom everyone at work just said goodbye to me. We'll see you in 6 weeks when you cut, and I'm going to be seeing all my colleagues at my baby's funeral. There was just so many thoughts going through my head as I was trying to process what was happening. And then he lived and we were so elated. And then around day 40, which is a really biblical number, anyone who knows the Bible, 40 days was, it rained for Noah and the ark, 40 days the Israelites were in the desert. And right on day 40, we got the MRI showing that he had actually suffered a severe oxygen depletion his last day of ECMO when he was just bleeding out, basically. And so that's when we found out he's alive, but he's probably going to have cerebral palsy and probably pretty severe. He, at that point, the neurologist had zero bedside manner, but he was just like, he may walk, he may not, he may talk, he may not, his right side will be better than his left. I mean, it was very just cut and dry. And as first-time parents absorbing, just there's no words really for all the feelings that are hitting. And I had actually grown up with some dear family friends who had an adult son with cerebral palsy who was able to talk using like a touch talker, but he was in a wheelchair. They did everything for him. So I had a frame of reference for what cerebral palsy meant. My husband, on the other hand, really had no frame of reference. And so I just remember, going home that day, just sucker punched, I mean, we were obviously so happy Bennett was alive. And then all of a sudden, bam, this diagnosis that was probably going to change everything about our future. And so that was day 40. On day 70, we got to bring him home from the NICU, which was amazing. He was a screaming banshee. So he was withdrawing from morphine. He probably had sensory overload. He probably had a raging migraine. I mean, who knows? His body had been through so much reflux, feeding tube down the nose, NG tube. I mean, you name it. And so if he was awake, he was screaming. And so that for first-time parents was also something we weren't, expecting. We were, planning lots of cuddles and walks through the neighborhood and just none of that.
Very different than
possible.
The picture.
I mean, all we could do was feed him, give him his 7 medicines, keep him alive. And then friends and family were bringing us food. And that's, I mean, this is 2007. So it's not, DoorDash wasn't even a thing, but somehow we got food. Yeah. It was just so hard. And anyone with a special needs child, diagnoses are across the board. But I remember laying in bed in the dark of night, probably like one of the nights right before we brought Bennett home. And, what I consider the voice of God just said, dig deep, and in my core, it's like, I knew I was going to have to dig deeper for strength I didn't know existed, for just wisdom, understanding, maturity. I mean, you name it, and also I just remember like feeling like I have to cling to Travis right now. And, you and I both know, I'm sure, I don't even know what the statistics are now for the divorce rate for parents of kids with disabilities, but I know it's high, like 80, 90%. And I get it. It would have been so easy to just check out at that point and each cope individually, I mean, we were in such a raw time, but I just remember feeling like I need you. Like I cannot do this individually. We have to stick together right now. And so long story short, Bennett is now almost 15. He is a delight. He is hilarious. He is still so feisty, and he's nonverbal. He is fed via a feeding tube, and he's in a wheelchair, and definitely, severe disabilities, one would say, seizure disorder, you name it. But he's a really, really happy guy, and he loves the wiggles, and he loves his house and his school and his car, and that's about it. Don't ask him to go somewhere he's never been before because he does not like new places. I say he's like a typical man. Change is not his favorite thing. He's just such a joy. And, we weren't even 30. We were like 29 when he was born. And he instantly changed our perspective on everything. Obviously, anyone with a special needs child probably would attest. It's like he was the gift we didn't know we needed because, at that point we really were like, oh, what kind of house are we going to get? Will we be able to decorate it with Pottery Barn? Will we be able to have the white picket fence? Will our kids all be wearing matching monogrammed clothes once they're, once we have 2 and 3 kids, just no. And there's nothing wrong with any of that at all. But it's just, when your baby can't breathe, all of a sudden, none of that matters. And so even to this point, I like those things, but none of that matters, and if our second son doesn't make a team, it's okay. It really doesn't matter, or if our daughter, someone's mean to her at school, we just have this whole new perspective on what is this life about. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. And I guess I haven't gone into too much detail about like what life is like now. Yeah. I think Bennett being our oldest, he was all we knew as parents. And then 3 years later is when we had our next baby, Jackson, and who was a gift from above and, just the strongest, healthiest ox really you've ever met in your life and just a force to be reckoned with. And then we do talk about in our book, our daughter was actually diagnosed at the 20-week ultrasound with a birth defect that was really, really, really difficult to just accept. I mean, that was one of those moments when we were like, seriously, God, are you kidding me? Have we not been through enough? Because, by the time I was pregnant with Reagan, we'd had multiple surgeries and hospitalizations and other near-death experiences with Bennett. And that was a hard one. She is the biggest, strongest, toughest girl you've ever met. We got through it just like we've gotten through every other thing in life. As you parents of special needs kids do, you just do it. And really there's such joy along the way. So
you did a great job walking us through all that. And what I noticed is that you're able to talk about some really horrific times, like dark times with levity right now, like where we're kind of laughing about it, right? Like we're not laughing about it, but we're smiling and we're laughing at the selves way back then. Because as you're telling your story about the Pottery Barn and all that, I was like, oh my gosh, when it's dating us to be like during that time when it's like, yes, because I had my first child, I think just a year after Bennett. That's just making me laugh a little bit. It really points to the journey that you've gone through, that it doesn't make any of that easier, but it shows us kind of who you've become now as a result of it. And just a glimmer into that you can have levity to talk about these moments of the thought of losing your child and all of the things. So thank you for sharing.
Sure. I mean, I definitely never want to gloss over it or act as if Pollyanna, everything's great. Our story does not end with a perfect red bow tied around the gift at the end of the episode. I mean, every day is still really, really hard. And in fact, sometimes I'm like, wow, it's actually getting harder because Bennett is getting bigger. As you and I were just talking about, our guys are getting physically bigger. My husband and I are only getting older, of whom, back and arms, the strength needed to lift and transport him and just care for him, really just get him dressed each morning. I mean, Bennett is dependent on us for every single thing imaginable, from sitting him up to swinging his legs over the bed, to plopping him into his wheelchair, to entertaining him. He's never had enough fine motor to even just bring his hands together, to suck a thumb, to hold a bottle, nothing. So we have always had to be his constant entertainment. Usually it started off early with books. We would do every animal noise in the world. He would just cry. He would laugh if we did an animal noise. So all we did was animal noises. And now then
you are very good at that lamb.
Oh my gosh, I could still do 3 books by heart. But Then obviously thank God for the iPad and thank God for YouTube Kids, and just things that are able to continue to just entertain him and bring him really even just soothing, he really doesn't have the ability to self-soothe. And so that is hard. Yeah, 100% as first-time parents saying for the rest of my child's life and perhaps my life, I need to be caring for him and or entertaining him every moment that he's awake. I mean, that I remember feeling the burden of that early on, like when he was home from the NICU, but as we were just, doing physical therapy at home and working on all that early intervention, just being like, how am I going to do this? I mean, because at that point I had a really successful career. I had career goals. That could be quite high paying, with quite a wonderful trajectory. And I had to quit my job basically by the end of 2007, because when it was awake, he was screaming. And I just remember thinking, there's no nurse or babysitter or nanny who can manage this crazy. I mean, it was so bananas. And so I just remember saying, okay, I'll put my career on pause. I know some moms take a few years, gap in their resumes and then they come back. And I have gone back at times, both part-time and full-time, and then back to part-time. And I've now turned down 2 or 3, very, very great job opportunities. And I remember after the last one that I turned down, I thought that's probably going to be the last one. My gap, in terms of my resume productivity, who even knows what, but I guess with the Great Resignation, maybe I'll have an opportunity. At the same time, it's worth every day with him. And that's what we realized, Bennett, one of the greatest gifts is his school. He goes to a public school for kids with disabilities. I mean, he's just poured into my teachers, therapists, just wonderful, wonderful humans on this earth. And while he's at school, I am able to work. Obviously, I'm able to volunteer my other 2 kids' school. And just life is just so full and meaningful. And right now I'm doing exactly what I want to do. Now, in terms of the other 2 kids, I'm going to have to help, I'm sure, pay for their college. And so we'll deal with that down the road. But at Bennett's school, what I was getting back to was that we have lost a lot of precious kids, and that's a reality of those of us with special needs kids. Time is not a given. Obviously, none of us know how long we have here on earth. As Bennett gets older and older and older, and, I've heard more and more seizures sometimes can happen more and more as they get into their teenage years, and the brain is changing, the body's changing. And I just feel like I'm holding on to dear life every day and minute that we get with him, and not to sound Debbie Downer, but it's just the reality of our life. And so since that is the reality of our life, it's kind of the way that we live our life and the way we see things. And then obviously with our 2 typical kids also, they are very well aware of, the fragility of life and how, number one, life is not all about them. And number 2, sometimes we have plans and all of a sudden those plans are deterred because of a hospitalization or a sickness or, you name it. And so, flexibility is definitely something that the type A control freak planner that I was, before kids, I have definitely evolved in that.
Yeah, you have to. What I really notice is that the acceptance of the state of his fragility, if you will. I mean, yeah, you read quadriplegic and it's full dependence, a fully dependent human. It's a lot. And what I hear though, is that you've accepted that his life may be shortened. You don't know, but that's giving you access to actually being in the now with him and being present and letting tomorrow worry about tomorrow. And so I think it's a really powerful place to find yourself. I want to go back to something you said, and it was kind of after the experience of having the diagnosis of your daughter when she was 22 weeks in utero. And you said, seriously, God? And I think that's actually something special needs moms, whether their faith is really important to them or not, I think it's a question I think comes up. What I was curious to ask of you is, what are other questions that you found yourself asking God during this whole journey so far?
Wow, that's a really good question. I've never been asked that. I think, when I got her diagnosis, I mean, it was a cleft lip. So she was born with a cleft lip and we did not know about the palate. They just could not see. So from the 20-week ultrasound to her birth at 40 weeks, they just said, we don't know. And I knew if that palate is not intact, that means a lot more complex surgeries ahead. And so it was 20 weeks of just waiting, and of which Bennett was 4, Jackson was 1, and I just remember I could not pray. My only words were, and what my heart was saying, God, I love you and I trust you, but my feelings are hurt. Like, this hurts my feelings. Like, why does my baby girl have to have a scar on her face and multiple surgeries? But I will trust you. So that was my prayer. Like, for 20 weeks, I trust you because, I've loved Jesus my whole life. I mean, the Lord, turning away from God was never an option for me. And I know that's not the case for everyone, but my faith never wavered in that way. But I knew he could handle the fact that my feelings were hurt and I didn't really want to talk to him much other than just, was proclaiming, I trust you. And so, I think, other questions my husband and I have said is, Bennett, kids with cerebral palsy, since they don't stand and their bones don't get that kind of just that weight bearing, which is so important. They stand in standers, but it's not the same. So he had to have a double hip surgery, which was basically that balls were coming out of the sockets. And so they needed to be put back in the sockets with metal plates to keep them in place. And it was really grueling. And I knew it was going to be, and we'd seen all the top people here in the DC area, and we were scheduled at Johns Hopkins with a phenomenal surgeon, and it happened and he was doing good. After 2 days, they're like, we're going to send you home. And I remember this fellow was doing rounds and he looked just like George Clooney in ER. And I was like, hey, so I'm a little bit nervous about going home, like transporting and bathing. And he goes, oh, you've got nothing to worry about. Those hips are screwed in so tight. Unless you just drop him on the ground, he's going to be fine. Don't even worry. And he turned around like a movie scene and walked down the hall. And I was like, we are good. Famous last words. We got home. That was summer of 2017. So Bennett was 10 years old. And it was perhaps the worst summer of our family's life after the summer of his birth. He had so many complications, infection. He was in so much pain. There were 2 ambulance rides to the hospital. And I just remember saying, God, how much more pain does this baby have to go through? I mean, watching your children suffer, as you know, and so many other moms know, there's nothing, it breaks you in a way you can't even really put words to. And my husband talks about that a little bit in the chapter of his book, because he was broken in different ways than me. I think moms and dads, obviously as unique creatures, just process things differently. But yeah, I mean, asking God, how much more do they have to suffer? Because as parents, even, of course, it's not fun. And obviously we reach our thresholds, but like, we can deal with it. But these poor, precious kids, this is not their fault. They are just doing the best that they can. It is so heavy to watch them suffer. So I think those are some conversations we've had with God several times, for sure.
Thank you again for sharing that. Well, I love that you put your conversation with God so much more eloquently than I might have. That's why you've written a book and I have not. But I want to point out that your prayer, your singular prayer, I trust you, was an act of choice. Like, your prayer was really you deciding to trust God. Because what was happening is you were like, kind of like, God, what's going on? Like, this is not what I thought you would do for me. But you were still making the choice to trust him. And I just think that it's really powerful to recognize that was an act of choice. And it was, of course, faith, but it was based, rooted in your faith. I also acknowledge, or I want to say, like, I relate to, like, I wasn't even able to pray, because I feel like oftentimes when I'm in the midst of like the real hard seasons, I just don't have the words. I don't even have the ability to feel that connection. And so really that's where I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to rely on people praying for us right now, because I just don't have that right now. And that's okay too. So I don't know. I just appreciate that you really had one line and it got you through that season. Our children suffering, I think, watching anybody suffer, but particularly our children. And I think it's like we're designed as beings, I think, to protect these things and do anything we can for them. And so I think when we're in the, like, I came up with this term with one of my clients called the forced witness position. And so it's almost like, because her child is self-injurious, and so she has to actually watch her child injure herself, and she can't do anything about it. And if you knew this woman, you'd know she has done everything to try. She's brilliant and also hilarious. And both of our children have violent outbursts, right? Where actually people do get hurt. And so it's like, but we're forced to witness this as their mothers because, and really, I mean, I could overcoach this and say, no, we're not forced. We're never forced, but I'm going to just allow it to be that right now.
Yeah,
because
sure.
being that there are children and having to watch that it's difficult on multiple levels, on the emotional level of just, it hurts. But in some cases, there's the actual physical experience of like, this actually does hurt me, like physically, and it actually makes me feel unsafe. Sorry, this is a side note. What I've also noticed is that when I'm watching my son, not as much hurt, but when I'm scared for his safety, like his health safety, my body actually experiences it as I am not safe. And maybe that's not healthy. I'm not sure. But I just think it's really interesting to notice that, like, as his mother, I carry a lot of that for him and with him. Anything to add there before we move on to a different topic?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can relate to that so intimately. Yeah, there was a scene outside of Johns Hopkins ER one night. So basically, after Bennett's hip surgeries, his bones were so brittle. He kept getting these fractures. I mean, if we just rolled him over wrong, he'd get a fracture. And so he'd be in excruciating pain. And we didn't know what it was the first time it happened. And so I put him in his leg brace. I got him to the ER and he's just wailing and wailing and wailing in pain. And I don't know if it was just a bad staffing night or what, but they all came out to me and they didn't have a stretcher. They didn't have a wheelchair. And he's wailing. And I'm like, he cannot walk. Can you please get a stretcher? Can you please get a wheelchair? Can you please get him back? Help me. And everyone is just kind of in slow motion, not in a hurry. And I guess it's just the mama bear or whatever it may be. I mean, I 100% was taking on his pain and I was about to lose my marbles, and not even out of anger, but just like, how can I be watching this right now? Because it is so, like you said, against every bit of our motherly instinct. All we want to do is care, protect, feed, just nurture. And it just left me feeling so exposed in such a raw way. Yeah. It's just heartbreaking isn't even strong enough of a word.
I agree. There needs to be one level deeper. Yeah. So knowing that you experience these deep emotional experiences that parallel alongside what you watch your son go through, what has helped you the most along the way, moving out of those survival states and into places where you can recognize and honor that this is and was very hard, but yet have hope and have a little bit of elevation above it, more so than you did in early years?
Yes, definitely. I didn't even know what the word respite was for a very long time. And because of, I guess, just our healthcare system and everything, we didn't have nursing help for the first 10 years. So we literally brought Bennett home from the NICU and learned everything on our own. And like, our insurance wouldn't pay for it. And we were just that kind of middle-class squeeze. And so, yeah, we didn't do anything without him with us, and then we had our second, actually we had both of our kids, and, we'd have grandparents who would help so we could go to dinner. I mean, obviously, but when you're, on such a pressure cooker situation, a date night really doesn't even scratch the surface of like what you need. And so, I mean, I appreciate all the people who gave us dates. I mean, 100%. There is a wonderful not-for-profit here called Jill's House. They're trying to open up respite across the country. And it's basically, they do weekend respite. So for 48 hours, you can drop off your child with disability. They have nurses and staff and therapists on, and they just, your child is.
Send them to San Diego first. Why don't you?
I know they're in Seattle. I'll tell them to California. But so when Bennett was 7, he went for his first weekend, and that was actually my husband's birthday weekend. And I just remember dropping Bennett off. I felt so guilty. I cried. I was like, I cannot believe I'm leaving my baby with strangers, even though they already had his whole medical workup and they were more than prepared to care for him. But we had 48 hours to ourselves, which had never happened in 7 years. And so it just like that gift of respite was something that we were like, oh, like you're functioning at such a high level of survivalness. And then for me, the crazy thing is every time I do have the letdown of like, okay, I get a break, like someone else is going to make sure he doesn't aspirate and choke to death overnight, or whatever, because he usually gets fed overnight. I usually get sick, either physically, like vomiting or headache. Like it's almost like my body doesn't know how to come down from that level 10. But I will say over the years, that is happening less and less, because it was like appalling to me at first. I thought, what is like, I can't relax, like, but it's not, but my body didn't know how. I mean, you probably know better than me being a coach of just like, the body doesn't lie. And I just felt like my body was truly didn't know how to bring it down a few notches. And so respite has been an amazing, wonderful gift that we don't get tons, probably a couple times a year, but for our marriage, for our younger typical kids who definitely need that time and attention. Because one of my greatest fears in life is them growing up to resent him and or the extra attention or just time taken away from investing in them that, clearly that he needs. And so I would just say people coming alongside and it being, because Bennett, like I said, just likes to be home. So we're at the point in life where we're just having to find people to come sit with him at home. So he's most honored. And then we can go do life with the little two kids so that they can, have as much of an quote unquote normal childhood as possible, whatever normal is these days. But yeah, I would just say respite has been one thing, has been a game changer for our family.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. I love your description of like it allowed you to kind of come down from the frenetic energy of like the buzz that you kind of operate at a constant. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to really relate to the idea that they may not know how to rest. I actually I'm studying a lot about this lately because, I'm right in there with everybody that has equated busy to like valuable and productive to like, that's which is what we're supposed to do, is be productive. And so rest doesn't really fit very well in that model. It's very conditional that you get to rest when or if, right? Like you can rest if Bennett's all taken care of, etc. Like we could go on and on, or you can rest when you get your work done.
Right.
And so I feel like most of us, I think, don't actually know what rest feels like. We don't ever allow ourselves to get to that place where we're actually rested. So more to come on that later, but thank you for sharing that and just kind of and normalizing the experience of this is just how we live. Anything else that comes to mind when you think about what has helped you process and accept and move through all the feelings of being a mom to a child with disabilities like Bennett's?
I have been very fortunate, and I know people #blessed. It gets so annoying, but like I'm not saying #blessed, but I am very blessed to have family and friends who people have wanted to help us and stared from afar and just said, oh my gosh, we can't. Number one, we don't know how to care for Bennett. Like they wanted to, they just didn't know what to do. And so, whether people sent gift cards to feed us or just text. I just remember when people would be like, you are so strong. I love you so much. Just like words like that really meant so much because I wasn't feeling strong. I was feeling so depleted and unsure of my ability to care for him. And just those words of affirmation 100% filled my cup. And, as the years have evolved, I'm the worst friend ever. I'm the worst sister ever. I'm the worst. I have so little to give anyone. So the fact that anyone is still like willing to try and be in my corner, I'm so appreciative of. I do feel like we're somewhat coming a little bit out of the rock in just terms of returning to like relationships in general. I mean, it was like 10 years of survival mode is kind of the way. I mean, a friend, she was like, you suffered for so long. How would, she's going through a season of suffering. And she was like, how long was it? And I felt terrible, but the honest answer was like 10 years. Like we're just truly like trying to keep 3 kids alive, fed, shoes on their feet, bathed maybe once a week, just, and just alive really at that point. And also finding really random people who come across our paths, whether it be Bennett's teachers or we now have night nurses who give us 8 hours of sleep each night. That alone, after the horrific summer of 2017, our state Medicaid office said, oh, okay, sounds like things are pretty bad. And they switched us to another list. We had been on a wait list for like 7 years for any type of nursing. And then all of a sudden, magically, we got off that list. And so we got overnight nursing. And so for 8 hours every night, I can sleep, hopefully, or, get things done, which is what I tend to do sometimes too. But just knowing that someone else is making sure he doesn't aspirate, doesn't choke to death, is safe and alive. And so, yeah, and I've been in therapy through the years. And I remember the therapist saying, you realize it's not normal. Like and not, she wasn't shaming, but just like most people don't have to go in every morning to their child's bed to make sure they're still alive. And I was like, you're right. That's not normal. Like, that's what I do every morning. Like, and I know it's crazy, but I also know what my reality is. And so it's a wild life, but 100% nursing, respite, friends are some things that have definitely eased our burden, but we don't have round the clock help at all. And so some people I tell that, they're like, you don't even have anyone during the day. And I'm like, no, maybe one day,
You shared really quickly about your therapist kind of helping you step back for a second and recognize this is not normal. This is truly extraordinary what we're doing. It reminded me of something a client was telling me. And basically she had to write down like the routine and like what she does to care for her child because she was actually getting somebody else ready to do it. So she really had to write down all the things. And she stepped back, she looked at it and she's like in shock. She's in awe. And she's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I do this. And so it makes me think of like, okay, if you want to, I think this would be a really valuable like 5-minute exercise for anybody. Because I think the gift of self-acknowledgement and validating your feelings of, wow, I'm really tired, or wow, I'm really overwhelmed, in actually acknowledging yourself for all that we do. I think because we've normalized it, it's normal to us. Sometimes we forget to acknowledge ourselves that we're doing something very extraordinary. And most people aren't going to be able to see that in the same way that we can, because I don't think we could ever explain to somebody like fully, till they fully get it, unless they're doing it along with us, to fully understand what it actually takes. So just an idea.
100%. And yeah, a shout out to all the moms and dads out there, because yeah, you're just warriors. And that's the thing, on the street, when I pass by, number one, I just want to hug any mom I see pushing a wheelchair or chasing after, an autistic or Down syndrome child or whatever, you name it. I just want to hug them, because my husband and I, we laugh. We're like, they get it. Like, it's so refreshing to come across now, whether it be for 5 seconds, but it's just that instant connection of like, you get it. And I see you and you're a rock star and I love you. And I would hug you if I had a minute, but you don't have a minute. I don't have a minute. So,
It's been a lot of episodes since, but I want to come up with like a secret gang sign for special needs moms to flash each other to like signal, like, we got you. I know, I see you. I got you. Because I was at the safari park. It's part of the zoo here last week with my daughter. And so Levi wasn't with me. And there was a boy in a wheelchair. And I was like checking out his wheelchair. And I was like, oh, shoot, I hope she doesn't think I'm staring at her kid. Because I was actually thinking, oh, my son needs that piece for his wheelchair. And I was like trying to figure it out. Then I want to just be like, hey, mom, like, I feel you. Like, we both have kids in wheelchairs and yours looks like maybe more than mine, like all the time. And I don't know, like, I don't know. This is my overactive brain. Okay. So, but then I was like, she doesn't have she's looking at me with my very able daughter. She has no idea what I have at home. And I was like, we need a sign. We need a way to communicate to each other. Or, I remember there was a moment where there was a child that was having a really strong response to my dog. We were like in a public area and he was very scared. And of course, when I realized that, I made sure that we modified where we were walking. Then I realized, I'm like, oh, I think he has some disabilities. I think that's probably why he was having a big reaction. And so I wanted to just like flash the mom, be like, I got you, like anything you need, like you tell me, but you can't. I mean, I was just like, just walk away with your dog. That's all you can do right now. Yeah, I don't know. We need a secret sign, like a secret society.
I totally agree. But it's so funny when you were just saying that, it really kind of struck something in me that we're feeling more and more that we're just, and I guess the feelings I would put to that is, like I said, Bennett likes to be home. So more and more he's home. And the 4 of us, Travis, my husband, and Jackson and Reagan, and I are out and about doing life. And it's almost like there's always this constant dull ache when he's not with us, because we want nothing more than for our whole family to be together all the time. Like, I want to take him to Mount Rushmore and Grand Canyon and fly to Europe, you name it, At times when we are out and about without him, it's almost like I don't want to say we feel like a fraud, but when we feel like a piece of us is missing, but at the same time, I don't feel like we're fully represented, because like if he were with us, then anyone would know, oh, they're a special needs family. But when he's not with us, it's almost like I want to have a sign of like, no, this is who we really are. Like, we are not this quote unquote, whatever you think, you're saying, because it's just, he is such a huge piece. I mean, he's defined us. He's changed us. He's, you name it. I'll never forget. I was standing in line at one of my favorite, I love Tex-Mex food. And we're at this Tex-Mex place. And this mom came up to me and she's like, I really like your wheelchair. And I had never been told that. And I was like, thanks. But I was looking at her and she had like a husband and two quote unquote able kids. And she was like, my daughter had one like that. Boy, do I miss it, or something like that, which, just basically told me she'd probably lost her daughter. And instantly, instant connection. I'm like, can we go sit in the corner and cry and hug? And I want to hear all about her life. And, but like, you can't when you're standing in the taco line. Life is so beautiful and hard and complex and messy all at once. I continue to learn that more and more every time I really leave the house, but it is so beautiful. And that's where it's like, no, when I say Bennett's life is beautiful, when I say Bennett's life is a gift, when I say he's all the perspective we need, I'm not just saying that, like, it's really is true amidst the hard, both things can be so true. And I think that's what is so countercultural in our society, when it's really all about like, no, get the best education and, like succeed, be, just you be you, blah, blah. I mean, all the self-help phrases. I'm just like, can I throw up in my mouth right now? Like, be true to yourself, mom of a child with disabilities. What do good luck with that. Like, but it's just, I don't know. I'm totally babbling, but
I love it. I like your rant. So I'm kind of formulating some new things for the group I'm running, or the coaching program. And I was like, I feel like maybe I'll do like a session where it's just like a bitch session, like a complaint, like let's get it out of our bodies, where it's like, we're not fixing anything. We're not having to be evolved kind humans. We can just get it out, because there's actually a lot of value to that. So I was just thinking about that today. Anyhow.
Oh, totally. Well, I've got an East
right?
Coast. If you ever come to the East Coast, I've got an awesome special needs mommy group who would love you. So come
that'd be great. I can just tour the world and go to special needs mom group after all. Okay. Landing this plane. Thank you for sharing the sign thing though, that you like want to have the sign above your head. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that gives some words to some definite feelings that like, I think I can definitely relate to. And I know other moms will as well. So you've told us about a lot of things, and you've referenced a book that you've written. You've written a book. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about the why, about like what got you to the place where like, I'm going to write a book. So tell us a little bit about that. And then of course, please tell us where listeners can find your book.
Okay. I definitely will. Thank you so much, Kara. So it's random. Like I said, I'm an accountant. I'm not a writer. I'm not an English major. My husband was an English major. We always knew our story seemed a little not your typical NICU story. It kind of was pretty dramatic, and our life since then has felt like a soap opera on numerous occasions. And I journaled kind of throughout. And then 2020 happens, 2021, and just here in DC, especially, I mean, we couldn't leave our house for, months, if not years. I mean, Bennett just took his mask off at school like a couple months ago. I mean, we have just been in this state of fear, anger, obviously politics not being the everyone's jam. And so I just felt in my core, like, we have a story of hope. Does it end perfectly? No. But does it, I mean, I have friends who are like, I'm having a really bad day. Can I just come hang out at your house? Because I feel so much better when I'm around Bennett. I mean, like, he really is just like this little Forrest Gump. Like, because of him, we've gone to really cool places and met wonderful people. And like, he just makes you feel good. And so I'm like, who are we to not share? Like, this world needs hope, number one, a feel-good story, number two, but yet doesn't have the most perfect ending. But who really always does have the most perfect ending in life? And so, long story short, I randomly met this woman and I never meet someone and then become Facebook friends with her, but she was like feisty and I just liked her energy. And so we became Facebook friends. And a couple months later, she's like, hey, if you've ever wanted to write a book, I just took a marketing director position at this hybrid publishing company. I thought, what do I have to lose? Like, I mean, I don't know this lady. If she thinks it's a terrible idea, I didn't even have a manuscript. I literally just sent her a paragraph, kind of just saying, this fellow told us at the Georgetown NICU, when my mother-in-law was trying to understand what is wrong? Like, why is he so sick? And she said, it's like your newborn baby is drowning. His lungs are full of pneumonia, and we were just like, our baby's drowning, And anyway, so that paragraph was kind of what I sent to the publisher. And long story short, she sent it on to her boss. And he said, I don't know if it's just because I just had my second baby or what, but I'm crying reading this. Will you please just keep writing? And so I kept writing. They partnered with us. It's a hybrid publisher. So it was a partnership, but they definitely helped with the writing, the editing, and of course the printing, distribution, and PR. And it's just been an incredible opportunity. And they have just, it is not a Christian publisher, and our faith is a huge part of our story. And I said, I really can't take this out. This is the foundation of who we are. And they're like, don't take it out. I mean, they basically let me keep everything that we wanted to keep. And it was just a really remarkable journey. And then the book just came out on May 31st and it's doing great. I mean, it's really resonating with friends, family, strangers, because I think the whole reason we wrote it, living in DC, number one, this is not the Bible Belt. So most people we know are not Christian. Number two, most people we know are not white. Number three, most people we know aren't parents of kids with disabilities. And so we wanted it to be able to be a book that anyone could read and take something from. And that was our goal. And that's our hope and prayer, that just like people will be encouraged and know that they're not alone. There are really good people out there, and that we were all created for a unique purpose, by our creator. And that's where I think, obviously we are very pro-life and for many reasons. And Bennett is, all three of our kids are examples of that for different reasons. Yeah, well, life is not easy, but it's beautiful. It's kind of just our mantra. And I know you had a similar one. I was reading. I don't know. We wanted to just give the world some more hope, because it has felt so dark and continues to feel like we're just living in like the twilight zone. And so anyway, hopefully this book is something that people can pick up and have a nice little escape from reality.
I think they've gotten a good flavor of you and your spunk, just the energy that you bring. And so I know that I certainly really have enjoyed this quick conversation, but I would also enjoy hearing more. And so I feel like if you felt the same way, go grab her book and support her. And then, of course, as always, all your links and all of the ways to contact you will be available via the show notes. And so feel free to reach out to Kelly to thank her for her contributions to this podcast. And of course, to ask her any additional questions that we didn't get to cover. And with that, I'll invite you to share anything else left on your heart before we close up.
Thank you so much, Kara. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Yeah, there's definitely, I say we're drama magnets. So our book is like, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll be like, seriously, if this happened to them? I mean, if something is going to happen, it's going to happen to us. So anyway, hopefully it'll be entertaining. But also, I just thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this podcast. I love special needs moms. I obviously, it's a club you never want to be part of, but it is one that once you're in it, man, talk about having each other's back. I just feel like I don't know you, but I feel like I know you. And I think that's just the beauty. Another thing Bennett's taught us is obviously relationships are pretty much all that matter in life. So I'm always open to new relationships. And if I can be an encouragement, please reach out. hopeintheheartache.com is our website. There's a blog that tells you a little bit more about our family. There's ways to get in touch with us. My husband is a whole other conversation. We really didn't talk about Travis much on this. Dads of special needs kids is kind of a whole nother just journey. And especially if they're the sole or major provider for the family. And so my husband's very, very open about his journey with just anxiety and depression and some prescription drug abuse in his chapter of our book. And he's just so willing to be open and support men and just kind of that whole experience as a father of a child with special needs. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today, Kara. It's a delight.
Well, as I said, likewise. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode and see y'all on the next episode. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.